because I was you know I was working with my friends. I'm still working with them on some project, and it was like we preferred to use the infinity free hosting, but our database contained blob objects, the binary objects that contain some audio files. So when we try to upload the database, it started to crash. So it was not a very good experience with infinity free. So technically what we did then, we did buy some cheap hosting which was available here in Pakistan. So now it's like a good thing. We can at least upload the a good healthy database that contains a good amount of data. So if you want to use it for
Yeah,
learning, that's very good.
yeah,
But
only
don't,
for learning.
yeah, that's okay. You can use the free hosting. Okay, so let's continue with the project that we were doing. Let Okay, first run this one, because last time what we did. Okay, the servers are running good, and let's open this up. Also, the diagram that we had used. Let me just open the database as well in the browser so that we can know our status of the work. Hmm. Okay, let us also open the database so that we can, right, let PHP, my admin, there we go. Okay, so yesterday we were talking about the database, and we were creating some tables last time for the project, and I hope you have the picture that you have taken the snapshot of. So can you tell me that how much entities we had discussed for our project?
Uh, there five, right?
Yeah, five.
The cart, yeah,
The,
the shipping history, the users,
okay,
the payment,
okay,
and there's something else.
okay, got it.
I
So,
forgot it.
okay, no problem. What was the online? What was the database name? I have so much databases. Let me just search it. I think I had created one, or haven't I created any? So
We did not create a database, right?
mm, I don't remember. I guess we did. Maybe I didn't create the tables. I also forgot to write the name. That's the very common mistake that I have done. Okay, if I didn't find it, let me just see. Okay, it's for the Nebula, online bookstore, online exam, inventory, PDF project, painting, pantomime. Mm, Okay, so I think, yes, brother, you're absolutely right. We didn't create any. Okay, so let's create one, and I'll call it online market system. And let's create this one. Okay, so we had our online market system created. Now, okay, I don't have the screenshot, but okay, let's create the users for the first, right? So we were discussing about the users, that the user will be of like two types. So I would say users, and let's press go after. So here we will now create the database. Now let me just move this one over here. Here. Okay. Now, first of all, every user will have the ID, that's for sure, and then I will press this check for the auto increment, and then this PHP my admin will automatically consider it the primary. So because it's auto implementing, the ID would be primary, so it's already selected by default. And then every user will have its email. I'm not going for the username because it's going to be too fancy. We want to just keep it simple as possible. The password is going to be the type of text. We can also select the varchar, but text is fine because it's going to do the same. And also, let's consider one more thing. Okay, so as we discussed earlier, that the user can be also of a type, customer, and can also be the type of the admin, because at this point I was thinking at my mind that the user the user can be so we can also have this ID for the type instead of the string. So I would say user, or to be more specific, type ID. Don't worry about this ID. I'll explain later what I'm going to do here. Let's create another column. Okay, so here I would say where the user is the type ID, and also the user will have the sessions of the cars and the cookies, car story. Okay. Okay, I would consider this here just for right now. And every user is of any type, and also the user has for instance. Okay, I guess that's it. Also, created at, I always do the created at because it gives us the timestamp functionality from the database. So whenever we are going to insert any data inside this table, it's going to give us the timestamp of the specific record that we have entered in the table so far. So let's select timestamp data type here. So it's going to be generated automatically for us, and then we can also fetch it from here. And then we can, at least consider, or at least we can, show the record to the admin then when the user was registered in the system, and we can do that by the timestamp here. So I will save this one, click on the save, and our table is created. If we, go inside the structure, we can see that this ID has the primary key, as we can also check this, the email, the password, the type ID of the user. I'm going to explain this later when I'm going to create the next table. And then also it has the created at. Moving on. Now let's create another table, and this table is called the type. Now, what's the type table? The type table will be having, okay, so let's say our system consists of only two major actors, the admin and the customer. The admin can, edit all the stuff inside the system. And the customer can, buy the stuff and add something. Now, for instance, the company grows and, try to do much more. So the the owner of the system decides that, okay, I also want the data of the employees as well in the in the system, that the admin can manage, and the employee can see his profile. So right now I'm not adding the functionality of the employee, but here the admin can add another type of the employer, and or we can also do that here, so that we can reference easily instead of adding the same user. And the type table will help us distinguish between all types of users that are interacting with the system so far. And also one thing that I prefer here is that the admin can also can also add the sub users, that the sub admins that can handle some amount of some limit of data inside the system, so that we can also give a much dynamic control to the admin. And it's very easy, it's not very difficult. It's just you have to make a good plan when you are making the system, and then you can give as much dynamic system to the user as much as you want. So let's continue with our type table. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to add the ID. The ID is going to reference the primary key. So I'm going to click the AI which means auto increment. I'm going to check this one. The primary index is already created for me. Now I'm going to say what's the type. So let's call this, for instance, uh, type type underscore name. That will refer to me as the type of the user, and I'm going to set it to text. And let's say the type. Okay, so every user has its type, and now for now, created at will be the best one, and I'm going to set it to the timestamp data type, and I'm going to save this one now. Now that's very interesting. We have now two tables inside the inside the database. And now what I want, let me open up my pad now, because now the scene is getting very interesting. So I'm going to open up my notepad here, and I'm going to say, for instance, oh, sorry, I guess I'm going to open the paint. Yeah. So let's say we have this users table, and let's say this is the users table. Now, now, brother, please, oh, it's very difficult. I will say it, the user. Okay, and one table is going to be the type table. I will say type. So now both inside the users, and both inside the users and also of the type, we have this one common term ID, right? So let's consider this ID. That is the primary key of this user table, and also the ID here, that is the primary key of the type table. Now, whenever we we refer to user to some type, we can we had two ways. The one way that is that we store the attribute of the type with the property, with the metadata of string, so that the user can like we can add the admin or customer or employee in the form of string. But that's not very that's not a very professional approach. So as we know that here's the primary key here, and also inside the type we have also this primary key. So we can refer the primary key of one table to be the reference inside another table. How cool is that? See, so whenever we are try to insert the data, it will automatically generate for us that specific data that we want to add. Now let me just tell you about this. So for instance, if we have this ID here, and here's this ID, and we also have another attribute that's called the type ID, right? We have this type ID. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry about my writing for now. Okay, so it is, so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to reference this ID of the type table to be the reference inside the user table. Okay, so what I mean by that, the ID that is inside the type table will be the foreign key that is inside the user table. Did you understand it, brother?
Yes, brother.
Okay,
so I know the foreign keys and the primary key.
That's very good. That's very good. Now, so how we're going to do that here? And let me show you the benefits of doing that. So I'm going to go to the users table. Okay, let's go to the users table. And what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to click on this relation view, and now I'm going to set here the foreign key constraint, as you can see. So I'm going to name this constraint, for instance, type ID constraint. And then in the column, I'm going to select to which column you want to refer to the primary key. I'm going to say type ID. Okay, in which database? So it's the online market system. So there we go. And now to which table you want to set the reference with, I'm going to say it's going to be of the type. And as you can see, the ID is automatically selected because in the type table as well, the ID was the primary key here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save here. I'm going to save this here, and our constraint is now created. So let's go to the type, and let's go to type here like that. Okay, so now we are ready with this. And if I show you the structure of the users table, as you can see here, that's the secondary color, the key with the secondary color is showing that this type ID column is now referenced with some table, and that table is as we know, it's the type table. So now let's add some data inside the type table. I'm going to insert. I'm going to click here on the insert. I'm not going to type any ID about this ID here because it's going to be automatically inserted because it's auto incrementing, and that's the primary key as well. So I'm going to say here, sorry, I'm going to say here admin. Let me just rewrite that, admin. I'm going to press go. And now I'm going to go to the insert again, and I'm going to say here, for instance, customer. And now let me press go. And as you can see, inserted row ID2, row ID1, and we are sending this is the query structure that it's showing us that, okay, in place of the ID, we're passing null, but don't worry about that. The database is going to take care for it automatically because it's auto incremented, and also it's the primary key. So we don't have to worry about that. And also the customer that we have given the value of the customer, and also it is using the current timestamp function. That's the default function which gives us the current timestamp by that server in which the database is hosting. Now that's a very important concept of the timestamp that I'm not going to discuss here for right now because that's not the key here for right now. But it's very good to work on the timestamp, because sometimes what happens that when we are working on bigger projects like customer relation management system or other systems like the POS, where the customer wants that I want the time of my region in which the time I registered, or the admin says that, okay, in which time of his country he registered. So they're like numbers of front-end libraries that gives us this functionality to get the timestamp of the user's region. That's the possibility. So I'm going to browse here, and as we can see, the ID is automatically generated for us. The admin and the customer is also generated for us. But one thing I'm concerned with now, as we can see here, that we must also be very careful that in this null attribute, it's by default from the database that it's saying it cannot be null, but sometimes by mistake we set it to null, that yes, the null value can be stored, and that's a very dangerous thing for here. Also for the users, if I say it's for every attribute they have set the null by default to no, and we must keep it like that, because sometimes we do make it the value can be null, and that's not a very good thing. Just a keynote to tell you guys. Now let's try to insert some data inside the user, and here we can add the values, but let's take a look at the type ID that we have referenced, or which is the foreign key to the ID of the table in type table. Now, if I press this drop down, as we can see that the values are already showing up. And that's the benefit of that specific, foreign key relation, that the database now know that it's going to refer to that, and I'm going to, press this, and it's going to store the data of the ID inside it, and then we can, use the join queries to get the data categorically and then use it in our system. However, I'm not going to insert any data right now because we are going to do that from our system. Now let's create another table. So we have created the users for our major digital entities that we have discussed earlier in the lecture. Now the next table that I'm going to name is that, what's the name of the next table? We had created the users, and okay, so only the user is created. Okay, so what was the next thing? Okay, let's create the cart table. Now, what will be inside the cart? Okay, yeah, I forgot. First of all, we're going to create the products table. We'll create the, we'll create that later on, the cart table. Okay, so the products table is the very important table, and the product table will contain the ID. That's for sure. Every table will have the ID. That's the one thing that we are sure about. Now, the next thing is that what's the name of the product? Okay, I pressed T on my keyboard so that the text is automatically created. And what is the description of the product? Now, what's the price of the product? For instance, okay, so for the price, the data type that I'm going to set here is the double. Okay, I'm going to create another column that will contain what's the stock of the stock, or to be more specific, to be more easy, what's the quantity of that product. So I'm going to leave int here because we are going to, like, enter the quantity, like for instance, if there's some pen, this type of pen, or the Parco pen, we have like 5 Parco pens, so that 5 is going to be stored inside the quantity so that the user will know. And if any user buys the product, we are going to, decrement the value from here so that the user will know that now only 4 products are left. So we are going to show the users that whether it's in the stock or not. The next, okay, so the price is created, the description, name, quantity. So the next one is going to be the timestamp created at. So when this product was created, and I'm going to select the timestamp. That's the default function. I'm going to save it here. So now we have the products table as well. It's the ID and all of the stuff. Now the next table we are going to create is the card. Now let's move on to the card, because now we can also refer the product ID as well. So now, before creating the card, I know that, okay, first I'll do the ID here because, every card will have the ID. Now, as we know that the user can buy multiple stuff, right? The user can buy multiple stuff. For instance, he can buy, pen or, books and all of that stuff. So how are we going to do that? Let's think about that. Now, as creating the system, I think of 2 possibilities here. One, this that I create, I refer it with each user ID, that, okay, for instance, this is the user ID and this is the card number, and this is the, for instance, this order is not confirmed here, or something like that. The shopping history, we can call shopping history the orders, right? Because that's more perfect name. Instead of shopping history, it's going to be the set of orders that are being confirmed. So these are the specific rows of the specific order ID, and then we can say that, okay, these were the orders that were created. Now, excuse me, please. Can you please? Excuse me. Okay. I have a phone call. Can I attend this, please?
Time, brother.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. Thank you.
Hello, अस्सलाम वालेकुम. शुक्र अल्लाह का ठीक ठाक. तू सुना कैसा ठीक है? नहीं कोई बात नहीं. अच्छा अली क्या बना फिर? नहीं कोई बात नहीं, कोई बात नहीं. नहीं कोई 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 ऐसा मसला नहीं. अच्छा वो अच्छा पता क्या, अभी ना मैं एक सेशन कंडक्ट कर रहा हूँ, ठीक है? तो फिर इंशाल्लाह ताला मैं बाद में बात करता हूँ, ठीक है? ओके फिर, ओके जानी, अल्लाह हाफिज़. अल्लाह हाफिज़. Okay, sorry about that. Let's continue.
No, it's okay, bro.
Okay, so yeah, so what I was saying, yeah, so there can be like multiple rows that will have the user ID, reference of the user ID, reference of the order ID, reference of the okay, so this is the card, so reference of the user ID and reference of the order. But you know, I have implemented this technique many times, but personally I don't like this one because you know it's going to create like a gush of records that's not going to be very good for the servers. And you know it's going to be, you know, storing like a whole lot of data inside the servers, and it's going to cost you. So what can be the other technique? What can we do? Like, you know, okay, so if the user is going to buy the multiple products, of course the user is going to buy the multiple products. It's going to be a very rare chance that the user is going to buy a single product, but you know, oftentimes they buy multiple products. We all know that. But so what we can do, can we set the array here so that, you know, it's going to be, or is it, or is there any possible way that the card will contain the order history, or the card will have the reference of the user, that this belongs to this user, and it will have the user ID, and also it will have the ID of the order ID. So the table of the order ID will have the you know, will have the reference of the user ID and the array of the product's ID that he has selected thus far. It is confirmed or not confirmed, that's going to be stored in that table. The card has nothing to do with that. So that's how we can do that. So let's do that. So I'm going to say user ID. It's going to be a reference to the user ID. I'm going to say it's going to be int. Of course, it's going to be an integer. And let's say it's going to be the order ID. I'm going to say the order ID. And created at is going to be the timestamp the card was created at which time. So okay, now the next question that comes in my mind, and this must be the question that comes in everyone's mind, that the user is going to buy multiple times. For instance, he had you know, buy some products and confirm the order, paid it, and after that he comes again. So every time the card ID will have each order's individual card, and this is not going, and then this is going to be much efficient rather than that approach that we were thinking about before. So I'm going to save it here, and everything's set up. Okay. Now inside the card, we are already inside the card table. Now we don't have the order table for right now to reference off, but at least we have the user table. So I'm going to go to the relation view. And inside that, I'm going to create, for instance, I'm going to say this user ID constraint. So I'm going to select the user ID column of this table. To which database? It's going to be online market system. If I'm not, yeah, online market system. To which table? It's going to be the users table. And of course, it's going to be 90. It already get it. So yeah, it got that one. Now, if we go inside the structure, as we can see, the secondary key, or the foreign key is created with the users now. Moving on to a new table that I want to create is of the orders. Now this is the very important one that I was waiting for to experiment with. So let's create the ID. Every order will have the ID. Of course, it's going to have the ID. How we're going to reference it without an ID. And every order will have the user ID with that the user has created this order. This user had created this order. And after that, now it's going to have product ID arrays, or I'm going to say product ID list. Okay, so what options does my PHP admin gives me? So let's explore this. Exploring is a very good methodology when we are going to research on something, because there are two ways: one to explore yourself, one to Google it out. But first, we should Google it out if we doesn't know anything about the system. But if we know something about the system, it's very good to explore it for yourself. So I'm going to explore the data types. So these are all the numeric strings, and okay, we can also use the strings, by the way, and because we can select the product ID that we have selected, and we can concatenate them with the using the comma delimiter, and then concatenate the string, store it here. But that's not the very good. It's not that much facilitating. So okay, so I can use enum, the enumeration type, right? So, or also we can use the set. Now I'm not very sure about this, so let's try to Google this out. Now set in, for instance, PHP my admin. Okay, so what does the Google say? So enums and set, so they're going to show us this example, and let's explore this out. Okay, so what does this say? Let's find out. Okay, so we can store like enums like this. So it's going to be the enums here, and we can select any of these values from the enum. Like for instance, you're going to select. So enum is not going to help us. Okay, now where were we? So now let's go to the next section. What does they say about that? So can we use sets? I think sets gonna help us. So sets in PHP my admin, my SQL. Oh no, it's always asking me about this. Okay, so let's look at this now. Default MySQL, creating database tables, primary key indexing. Let's look at some images. Maybe we can get the clue from what we're gonna do here. Okay, so this is referring to the sets, and let's look at here. Okay, so now we're not getting any reasonable resources. So what we can do here is that I'm gonna select. For now, I don't know, I'm much satisfied with this set, the single value chosen from a set of up to 64 members. I don't understand that, but okay. Added enum or set values. Okay, so now this is not going to help us, because we can set like a limited number of values here by default, and the user can select that one, and then it's going to store at that point. So it's not going to help us. So what we can do here is that we can set this to text type. And so what's going to happen here, let me just remove all this and explain to you how the string is going to help us identify that one. Okay, so let me just, this can be removed. Okay, get it. So for, let's say the user have selected multiple products, is going to be product 1, It's going to be product 2, product 3, up to so on to product n. Now all these products are selected, and we want to, store some list, concatenated string list inside the database. So what are we going to do? We're going to get all the values, and we are going to concatenate these values with the delimiter of the comma. So it's going to be like this: p1 id, comma, p2 id, comma, p3 id, and up to so on to pn. And this is how we're going to store it inside the string. And when the user fetches the data from the database, in place of its card, that what products he has stored, we are going to. So what are we going to? We are going to do. We are going to split the string. I hope you are familiar with the split concept of the string, right?
Not actually.
Okay, so the split, what's the split is going to do? Split is going to, we are going to, split is a function inside the string function in all the languages, including Java, that in string, in split function, we should give two parameters. The one parameters is the string that we want to, this string that we have. Let me just make it in the string way. This is the string. So we are going to give this string to the split function, and now it's going to ask about the delimiter, that which delimiter inside the string with respect to you want to split off. So let me repeat my statement again. The second parameter is very important here. The second parameter says which delimiter, either it can be a space, either it can be a comma. By default it is a space in some programming languages, for instance JavaScript, but in Java we have to specify the delimiter, if I'm not wrong, maybe. So the delimiter is like, you can say some symbols that we have defined inside the string, like for instance this comma here, this comma here, that okay, we are going to give you the delimiter, comma, and with respect to this comma, you are going to split that string. You're going to split the data inside the string. So when we are going to give this delimiter comma, it's going to see, okay, so this is the comma here, split this, and and store it in a list. Okay, this is the comma here, split it and store it inside the string. Okay, this is the comma here, split it, and all this splitted data is going to be stored inside the string array or list, and it's going to return us that specific list to us, and then we can reference these product IDs with the database, and then get the products that the user has requested thus far. So I hope you got the concept of splitting, right?
Yes, almost. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah. So when we are going to use it, you're gonna know that how it's working, right? So this is split. This is a very important concept. So for right now, I'm gonna make it text, because we will convert that to the IDs, numbers, and then we are going to process it later on. So after that, it's going to be created at, and then let's make it, for instance, timestamp, that I know that when this order was created. And also one more thing I almost forgot. What I'm going to do here. Okay, let us. Yeah, one thing what I'm going to do here. Yeah, I want to know that is the order is confirmed. So I'm going to say order confirmed, and I'm going to select here Boolean. If I have Boolean here, is the order confirmed or not, just to let me know that, okay, the order is confirmed. And if the order is not confirmed, I hope I can find the Boolean here. If I have the Boolean, okay, no, I'm not going to use the binary. It's going to be so much pathetic to use binary. So okay, I think I got the B. There you go, Boolean. So we'll have the Boolean, and then using that Boolean, either true, the order is confirmed, not true, the order is not confirmed, and means false. So let us save this. And as we can see here, that that we have this, Boolean here with us, and then, using the Boolean, we can refer to this thing now. Moving on. Now we have the user ID and the product list ID. So we cannot reference this product list because it's the type of it's the type of string. We're going to do that manually, but at least we can refer to this user ID. So let's do that here. I'm going to click onto the relation view, and inside the relation view, I'm going to say user ID constraint. I'm going to select which attribute, okay, and which the database. It's the online market system. Which table? Oh, I'm sorry. It's the users table. Users. There we go. And the ID is already selected. Save it. Okay. Creating foreign keys on the user ID. Check data types. Okay. I guess I may have something wrong with the data type. Let me just check the structure of the table. It's the int and so it is okay. Okay. Let us make this again, and let me see the users. Allow me. Okay, selecting the user ID from which table? Online market system. Online market system, okay. I'm gonna select the users, and the ID is already selected. So I guess nothing wrong with that. Okay, it's created, thank God. Now let us look at the structure of the orders, and as you can see, it's already referenced. Now in the card, as I promised, that we are going to reference the order ID with that. So let us reference this one as well. So I'm going to, relation view, and I'm going to say order ID constraint. Okay, so if you have this question in your mind that why I am doing the underscore, it's a good naming convention to, put underscore instead of the space. And PHP MyAdmin or any database vendor is going to accept this one. No problem with this. So I'm going to select the order ID from the card table. I'm going to select the database, that is the online market system. And also I'm going to select for instance, what's the orders table, and the IDs are automatically selected. I'm going to save this one, and it's created. Let's check the structure. And as we can see here, this foreign key is also created for the order ID now. So let us revise that one now. We have created the users. For the users, we have created for the products, we have created for the cars, for the orders. And the last one now is the payment. So the payment is the easy one. It's not the very difficult one. So the payment is going to be like of two ways. The payment methodology, or we can call this like the balance or the wallet. It's going to be more good if we call this wallet, because the wallet will contain, okay, how much balance this user has got, if you want to add more balance. And some applications like Food Panda or other applications that allows us to add you can add balance to your wallet, so that you don't have to connect your card again and again. And it's a very good functionality, by the way. So if the user doesn't have the card at any time, or if he has changed the device, so that his record can be remained with the database, and it's much convenient that way. But you can also disagree with this approach, but for now we're going to do that. So I'm going to say user ID. This wallet is going to belong to which user ID, and okay, so it's the integer. And the next thing is going to say the balance, and is going to be double. And for our system, what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to set the default. So when we set any default, so the default means that if any record is created inside the table, this default value is always going to be there at any row created first time. So it can change afterwards, but this is going to be the default one. So what options do we have in the default one? The default one has this null. So if any value is going to be null, it's for everyone. That's by default. But as defined means that define your own one. So I click on as defined, and it gives me another field to put my value of that type that I've selected, like double. So I'm going to say, so which currency do we deal with? Okay, let's deal with the dollars, okay, because that's the hot currency right now in the world. So let's say, to make the user happy, I can say that, okay, if any user registers, and if he registers inside the system, he's going to get $50 for free to buy anything stuff. So that can track the marketplace. Okay, moving on. Okay, so we have the balance, we have the user ID, and the user can add this balance anytime he want using the payment gateway that we'll create our own sample payment gateway just to learn. And I'm going to create the created ad. And now notice this one thing. As I select the timestamp, notice that the default value for it will already be the current timestamp. And as I save this, notice one thing now. As you can see, the default is already current timestamp. See? And also for this balance, it's already 50. Now, we are done with our wallet. We are done with our orders. We're done with our products, type, users, everything. So our database is selected. And let me show you. These are our tables. We have the cards, we have the orders, we have the products, we have the type, users, and wallet. So I can say a general ecosystem for the online market system is now ready for us. Now, moving on, let's go inside our project. And oh, one more thing I forgot. Now, another thing to learn about. When we create any table, when we are done creating any table, and if we think afterwards that, okay, I want to add this one other thing inside the system. So what are we going to do here? We're going to click on these products, and then I'm going to say, okay, our products must have the pictures, right? Because we're not going to get this picture effect now because we don't have any attribute for this. Now, in the world of web development, when we want to store the binary images, when we want to store the data of audio file, video file, or any images, there are like multiple techniques that each group of the developers do follow, and one of them is that using the blobs inside the database. But here's the catch. We can use the blobs in our project, and we will use the blobs in our project. But the advantage of the blob is that when we are going to call the object of the specific data, we're also going to get the binary data with it. Okay, so this is the advantage. We don't have to write extra code to get that stuff. But or by code I means to reference the extra stuff. But here's the disadvantage of that. When we fetch multiple data, like products that have the binary images or the binary data with it, so it's going to get very slow. It slows down the website. So blob gives us advantage of quick access the data, but also a disadvantage is that when we're going to access that data, the runtime, or you can say that the running time of the Windows gets very slow, too much slow that if there's going to be like multiple records and the user starts to get increased, your website is definitely going to get crashed, or sometimes it's going to respond too much late. So it's not a very good technique. The other thing that people do, that they store the images inside their projects, and they just write the name of the image when they upload the data. And also after uploading that specific data, what they do is that they discard that thing. Or how can you say this, they store the name of the image inside the table, and then they have stored all the images inside their project. So that's also a very good technique. But you know the benefit is not that much good, because your project that has like multiple of images and of every user, and also that project also has that code inside it. So it's not a very good thing. It's going to be very risky. I mean, you do take risk inside your business, but you don't take technical risk inside your business. You try to avoid it as much as you can. And also, that's not a very good technique in my opinion, but some developers do say, okay, you can do that if it's a small scale project. But we must also consider good techniques. But a very famous technique that people do use, and I don't know, maybe websites like Amazon, or maybe other shopping websites like that are famous in the world, like AliExpress or Alibaba.com. What they do is that dedicate they dedicate the FTP servers to their project. So as we know, these big giants have their own FTP servers, but they don't have to worry about these things. They have already dedicated their one space for all of the binary data, or all of these blob data. So what they do is that they have their unique identifier of each file, and for each file, whether it can be an image, and it can be an audio, it can be a video, each data has its metadata. Like the audio will have its name, the audio will have its duration, the audio will have its artist name, whatsoever. Every binary data must have its metadata. And that's even in your mobile phones, you must have seen this, that if you have taken a photo, like if you can you can analyze this in the Google Photos, if you can check in your mobile phones, that when you open any image in Google Photo, what it does, it shows us the metadata of that photo, that okay, you have taken this photo like 5 to 6 years from now, and its date, its the full timestamp is embedded inside that. And you are amazed to see that, man, I have taken this image like long time ago, and I have this metadata. So you generally realize the important data inside that. So we don't get that with these kind of techniques. So the FTP technique is very good, that each each binary data will have its unique identifier, and that unique identifier is going to reference that file that is stored inside the FTP. Okay. So I know that this thing is getting very long, but just to give you the major concept, that how people store that file, let me just redo everything that I've done here for now. And let's say this is the FTP server. Okay. But don't worry, we're not going to get so much complexity. Just to give you an overview that how a good company, I'm not saying that this method is being followed by the big companies, but they work around it somewhere, but I don't know the exact method they do. I may have to research on that, but this is my opinion that they must be doing, because you have like a millions of users data. So you're not going to use the blob technique, or you're not going to use the, you can say, storing the data inside your project hierarchies. And so that's very dangerous. This is the FTP server. This is the FTP server that is dedicated to use to store all these audio, images, and video files, and other kind of files that you are concerned with. And this is our project. So what's going to happen when I'm going to write the big P here. So what's going to happen when the user uploads its data inside this system? It's going to place that inside the FTP server, and then the FTP server is going to return a unique identifier, which I call the UID. It's going to store the UID inside, and then it's going to return as this UID. And then we are going to store that UID inside this DB right here. I'm going to write this D and B. It's not looking very good. So that unique identifier, this UID, is going to be stored inside this DB. And then when we are going to fetch that data, we are going to get that DB. And then, we can use the same unique identifier to get that data. And it's much good instead of, getting that data and, accessing the user's data is going to get much slower. In this way, accessing the user's data is going to get much faster. And then, the binary file, like for instance, any video, any audio, any image may take time, or it can be buffered, but the general data is going to be with us at any time so far. So this is how this technique goes. As per my research, as per my opinion, it can be around, it can be much better than that, and I know it is much better than this what I'm explaining here right now. But this is how I see in this way. But it works somewhere around that, or I work somewhere around that, by the way. So much talking for this, and I know I've taken a lot of time, but just to give the good ecosystem, that how the people do work inside the industry, and how we must have our positive approach when you're working on a big scale projects. So moving on, I'm going to create a blob here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on the structure, and inside this structure I need to add some data. So it's giving me here, if you want to add data, you can add one column, one attribute, but you want to place that attribute after which attribute. So I'm gonna see this drop down, and I want to say that I want to place this data after the quantity. So I'm going to click here after the quantity, press go, and then here it is. Okay, so I say blob image is going to be the name of the attribute, and then I'm going to select the blob. So let's move on to the blob section. And we have this, for instance, tiny blob, blob, medium blob, long blob. Wow, there are 4 types of blob. So what's the tiny blob do? Okay, it's saying that the tiny blob can store like 255 bytes of data. Okay, not enough. What do the blob does? Okay, so it stores like the maximum of 65,535 bytes of data. Okay, it's going to be some MBs. I'm not very good at calculation. Okay, so the medium blob is going to be storing like 16,777, 215. Oh my God, 2 to the power 24 bytes of data. Okay, and the log blob is going to be like 4 gigabytes of data. It is the 2 to the power 32. So it's going to be a long blob, but I'm not going to select long blob because it's going to take too much. I mean, the images are not like, the 4 gigabytes of images, but in the future they may vary. So I'm going to select the medium blob. Okay, so, okay, medium blob is fine. And if I'm not sure, okay, I've saved this. And if I check the structure of it, as you can see, the blob image is placed after the quantity. And if I'm not sure about the size of the medium blob, what I can do, I can Google it, size of medium blob. Okay, so it says it is 16 MB. I guess 16 MB is quite fine. I'm not going to place the long blob. It's going to be 4 gigabytes. That's too much crazy about that. But in terms of the image, so we have our table ready at the table, and we are done with our database section. So, brother, how much time do we have?
I am free, brother. No problem.
Okay.
Up to you.
Okay. So let's get this with the project now. Okay. So let me just move it here so that we can see properly. Let me just close this tab as well, and let's open the source packages. Now, the approach that I use is, now we will be working with the servlets. And what I would do here is that, let me just close this one as well so that I can have a new pad. I will create the packages for it. And the first package I will create is the database package. Now I would write here database, and the database package will contain the database class. And now, as I have mentioned the singleton pattern, have I mentioned the singleton pattern in any of the previous sessions?
I don't know. Maybe Salim was here, but not me.
Okay, no problem. So I would create a class that is called database. Okay, and this database class will be a singleton class. Now, hear me what I'm going to say here. Okay, so the singleton class is a design pattern, and in any programming languages, the design patterns are one of the most useful way to do the programming work. And if you're not sure about the design pattern, let me show you, because I'm going to use the singleton class and we are not familiar with that. So the design pattern, what they say that the design pattern represents the best practices used by experienced object-oriented software developers. Now, what's the catch here? The point of the matter is that the design patterns, they were like bunch of developers in, like, in the early 80s or 90s, and they were working on some project, and they found out that they were, like, writing the same code again and again, with, which was taking their time, and they were like too much exhausted for their work. So what they did is they found a way to write, they found like multiple ways for different projects as per their business logic to reuse the code every time they want to reuse in their specific place. So they wrote design patterns, like they wrote efficient design patterns, efficiency in terms of time space, in I'm sorry, efficiency in terms of running time, and efficiency in terms of you can say space, efficiency in terms of reusability. So there are like multiple design patterns, and the most famous of them are singleton design pattern, MVC design pattern, that is famous in, like, many you can say modern frameworks, like you can say PHP has this, like, Laravel, and also in .NET technologies, and it also in Java as well. And if we talk about new technologies like Node.js, people do refer to the MVC. So MVC is, like, uh, you can say a good technique in the modern technologies. This is as simple I can explain this right now here. So let's talk about the singleton. So what's the singleton here, and what's the catch with the singleton, and why I'm so much enforcing here to use the singleton in this database class? But first of all, what's this database class is going to do? What is it going to give us? So the database class here, we are going to use to connect our system to the database that we have created there. Now, let me open up my pad and explain you how the stuff works. So I'm going to open the node again. I'm going to open my notepad. So I'm going to select the paint here, and okay. So yeah, okay, so this is the project here. Oh, I can say this is our system. And in this system, we are going to connect this system to our database. So how it is going to be possible? Now, this is our database that we want to connect, because we are going to store our precious user data in this database. So the connection between these must be possible with in terms of some driver. So Java or so MySQL has this lot of drivers to provide with other vendors, because we are using the PHP that is specific to MySQL, and there are like other for if you want to use for the Postgre, so there's another driver that is specific to the Postgre SQL, and if you want to use it with MySQL, then there's a specific driver available for the MySQL, and there are like lots of for the Oracle and other uh, databases as well. But in for this current administration system that we have, we're going to use the MySQL driver. Okay. Now we have, for instance, we have the driver. So when we, when we request the data, from our system to the DB, it creates an instance inside the memory. That instance, let's say this is our memory, and let's say this is our memory. And when the system creates an instance, when it tries to connect that to the DB, we are going to communicating with that DB using some instance inside the memory, because every instance, every object instance that is created inside the memory is going to be stored inside. Every instance that is created inside the memory will be communicating with our database. So when we enable our driver, okay, so let's say this is the driver that we have enabled. And when we're going to connect that, it's going to create an instance inside a memory block. And that instance will contain the data of the table of the database of its, what's the database and what's the username of it, and what's the, what's the server it is, where's the server. Every information will be contained inside this specific instance. Now, when we're going to request it, this instance is going to request that, or not this instance, it's, the data will be used inside this instance, and then this driver will use this this object, and then using that information is going to communicate with the database. And then the database will be returning the data which we will use, and then display it accordingly as per our business logic. So this is how the stuff works. But do consider that we are going to request the data. We have this product, so we're going to request the user's data, we're going to request the data of the card, we're going to request the data of the products, and there will be like multiple of data that we are going to request from the database. So is it possible that the system will create the instance every time we request from the data? It's going to create like multiple instance inside the memory, and it's going to slow down the system, and that's not the very good way to do that. So what's the catch here? What we can do here? So we have this technique called Singleton Class. A Singleton class is a design pattern that is used to create an object that will be created once, and then after that, that same object will be reused again and again and again, and you cannot create another instance, a new instance of that Singleton class. How cool is that? Now let me show you some of the architecture of the design pattern, and that's very interesting. I know I'm getting a bit detail over here, but if we are conducting this session, then we must give a very good detail here. So let me move on to the Singleton pattern, and then we'll know what we're going to do. So let's look at the diagram over here. Let me open this in another tab. So let me zoom this. Okay, so as we can see, this is the main class over here, right? Let me select the, if I have some pen. Okay, so I have many options here. Okay, so I can draw. Okay, so I'm going to use this one. Okay, so we have this. Oh my God. let me just, okay. So we have this main class, that is the main. Okay, it asks for the object from this singleton object. So in this, it contains an instance which is singleton, and also there are like two static objects, two static functions, sorry, that will return that instance once. So what happens when this main class is going to request the instance from the singleton object? What it what just Okay, so what it's going to do, it's going to request that instance from the object, and then once it has created that instance, it's going to ask again for this object, and then the already created instance is going to get returned inside the singleton pattern demo. See? So this is how it works, that once it has requested the data, it has requested the instance, it's not going to return the new one, it's going to return the same one because it is already created. So this is the beauty of the singleton object, to reuse that object again and again, because we know we have to request this like multiple times. So let me just close this one and let me check the, okay, okay. So enough talking. Okay, I think I need to clear this one here. This is getting too much. I want to clear this one. Please do that for me. Thank you. Okay. So let's do that here right now. So I'm going to create two variables. First, I'm going to create private connection. And what's the connection is going to be? It's going to be the Java SQL connection. I'm going to name this connection. So the first parameter, so the first member variable is created. I'm going to write here member variable. And then also we have this private static. Now the static variable is not the part of the object, as I have, okay, let me tell you, the static variable is not the part of the object. So for instance, like any class, object is created multiple times. So a one class that has multiple instances, multiple objects created inside a memory will will have the same, so all of those translation units, all of those objects will have the same copy of the static. So if I change the static variable at any object, using any object, or we cannot we don't use objects to change the static variables. For instance, I change the static value inside any class, so all of those will have the same value. So this is the major key inside the singleton pattern design. Now I'm going to say I'm going to get the private static database, the name of the same, this is the name of the class I'm referring to, database, and it's then going to be, I'm going to say this, the connector, or connector, yeah. And to avoid the outside world of this class, to get its object created every time, I'm going to set the private constructor. Okay, so this is new. So I don't want any outside world or any outside of this class to create the new instance of this class. So I'm going to create a private instance. And do remember, this private constructor will be only created inside of this class, and it cannot be instantiated outside of this class. So that's the beauty of this. To remember this one. Now, I'm going to, I'm going to instantiate the connection afterwards. For right now, what I'm going to say now is going to be another thing. So let's say I say public. Let me just is this recording. Yeah. Okay. So public static get database connector instance. Like a long name. So get database connector instance is going to return us the same instance created one time. So inside the function, now this is the key inside, and this is very important. So do watch carefully. I say, so inside the static function, we can access the static variables. Okay. So I say if the connector if the connector is null, and I know the connector is null. If the connector is null, please do instantiate the new database object. And as we can see here, we have created the instance of the database class, but inside of this class, we cannot do this in outside of this class because we have already mentioned the constructor to be private. And if it is not null, then the connector instance is going to be created for us there. So we're going to return that connector. But okay, so it will be of the database type, the type of this class. And now I have if okay, so here's the catch. If the connector is null, it's going to create the new instance and return the connector instance. And if the connector is not null, it's going to get false. It's not going to run this piece of code, and then it's going to return the same instance to us, because as I've mentioned earlier, this connector instance is never the part of the class. And so if any object is created, which I know that it cannot be created, but okay, so it's going to be the same for every other object. And the last thing I'm going to do here is that I'm going to create the public connection, the java.sql connection type, and I'm going to say the get connections, that we can get the connection instance that is created inside the memory. And I'm going to say return this. This means refer to this specific object connection. There we go. That's it. That's the whole game of this. So that's it for today. And tomorrow we will do the implementation here to instantiate the connection to the database, and also implementing the driver. And then also I think I don't have. Yeah, so tomorrow we will also add the library of the MySQL JDBC, and then enabling that JDBC to connect that to the database, and then using that instance to communicate with the database. So any questions in this session today, you can ask me, please.
It is clear so far. Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you so much, brother. So yeah, I'm I'm stopping the recording here. How to stop? Okay, so